Late 1943. 25,000 feet above the freezing, flak-filled skies of Germany, the United States Army Air Forces were bleeding to death. The mighty B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators were carrying out the Daylight Strategic Bombing Campaign, a deeply perilous mission designed to cripple the industrial heart of the Third Reich. But they were doing it completely unprotected. The standard American fighter of the time, the rugged and massive P-47 Thunderbolt, and the legendary British Spitfire were incredible dogfighters, but they suffered from a fatal, catastrophic flaw. They simply did not have the fuel capacity to fly all the way deep into German territory and make it back home. According to the harrowing combat logs of the 8th Air Force, American fighter escorts were forced to turn back at the German border, right at the edge of their operational range. And the pilots of the German Luftwaffe knew exactly where that invisible line in the sky was drawn. They would sit just beyond the range of the American fighters, circling like wolves, waiting for the escorts to turn around. The moment the bombers were alone, the German Focke-Wulf 190S and Messerschmitt Bf 109S would tear into the unescorted bomber formations with devastating 20mm cannons. The slaughter was unprecedented. During the infamous Black Thursday raid on the ball bearing factories at Schweinfurt in October 1943, the Americans lost 60 heavy bombers in a single afternoon. Over 600 men were killed or captured in just a few hours. The bomber crews were breaking psychologically. The daylight bombing campaign was on the verge of total collapse, because everyone knew that a bomber without a fighter escort was just a flying coffin. But then, everything changed. In the early months of 1944, German interceptor squadrons climbing into the freezing air to intercept another wave of American bombers looked out their canopies and saw something that completely shattered their absolute dominance. Flying right alongside the B-17S, deep in the heart of German airspace, hundreds of miles past the point where the Thunderbolts had to turn back, was a sleek, silver, razor-thin fighter plane that the Germans had never seen before. It did not turn around. It stayed with the bombers all the way to Berlin, and when the Luftwaffe tried to attack, this new American fighter did not just defend. It dropped its external fuel tanks, accelerated with terrifying speed, and slaughtered the German hunters in their own skies. This was the P-51 Mustang, the apex predator of the Second World War. And the story of how it broke the back of the Luftwaffe is a masterclass in desperation, engineering, and sheer aerodynamic perfection. If you have absolute respect for the bomber crews who flew into the meat grinder and the fighter pilots who finally arrived to save them, hit that subscribe button right now. We do not gloss over the harsh realities of aerial warfare on this channel. We put you right in the cockpit, analyzing the brilliant engineering and the brutal tactics that decided the fate of the world. Type the word hunter in the comments right now if you are ready to see exactly why the German military could not shoot down the ultimate American warbird. To understand why the P-51 Mustang was so incredibly untouchable, you have to understand its bizarre and almost accidental origin story. The United States military did not actually ask for the Mustang. In 1940, the British Purchasing Commission approached the American aviation company North American Aviation with a desperate request. Britain was fighting for its life, and they needed North American Aviation to build Curtiss P-40 Warhawks under license for the Royal Air Force. The president of the company, a brilliant man named Dutch Kindleberger, told the British something completely audacious. He told them he would not build an old design. He promised that his team could design and build an entirely new, vastly superior fighter plane from scratch in exactly 120 days. The British, operating out of pure desperation, agreed. The engineers at North American Aviation worked continuously, sleeping on drafting tables, and delivered the prototype of the Mustang in an astonishing 102 days. But the early Mustang had a massive problem. It was fitted with the American Allison V 1710 engine. According to the technical specifications of the era, the Allison engine was incredibly reliable at low altitudes, but it lacked a multi-stage supercharger. This meant that the moment the early Mustang climbed above 15,000 feet, the exact altitude where the strategic bomber war was being fought, the engine simply ran out of breath. It became sluggish, underpowered, and completely useless as a high-altitude escort. The British relegated these early Mustangs to low-level reconnaissance and ground attack roles. It seemed like the plane was destined to be a forgotten footnote in aviation history. But then, a British test pilot named Ronald Harker flew the Mustang and noticed something extraordinary. The plane was underpowered, yes, but the airframe itself was a masterpiece of physics. The aerodynamic drag on the Mustang was shockingly low. He suggested something that would fundamentally alter the course of the entire war. He suggested taking the American airframe and bolting in the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the exact same supercharged mechanical heart that powered the legendary Spitfire. When the engineers successfully married the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine to the North American airframe, creating the P-51B model, the results were not just an improvement, they were a violent, world-shaking paradigm shift. The secret to the Mustang's absolute superiority, and the reason the Luftwaffe could not touch it, came down to a revolutionary engineering breakthrough known as the laminar flow wing. Standard airplane wings of the time were thickest near the front, creating a massive amount of turbulent air, or drag, as the plane pushed through the sky. The engineers who designed the Mustang moved the thickest part of the wing further back and flattened the profile, allowing the air to flow smoothly, or in a laminar fashion, over the surface. According to the wind tunnel data preserved from the era, this wing design drastically reduced aerodynamic drag. When you combine an incredibly low-drag airframe with the massive supercharged horsepower of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, two incredible things happen. First, the plane becomes blindingly fast, capable of easily exceeding 430 miles per hour at high altitude, outrunning almost everything in the German arsenal. Second, and infinitely more important, because the plane slips through the air with so little resistance, it burns significantly less fuel. This fuel efficiency was the dagger to the heart of the Third Reich. While a Spitfire or a Messerschmitt Bf 109 was a short-range interceptor that could only stay in the air for roughly an hour and a half before needing to land, the P-51 Mustang had massive internal fuel tanks built right behind the pilot's seat and could carry two massive drop tanks under its wings. A fully fueled Mustang could stay in the air for over 6 hours. It had an operational range of over 1,600 miles. The Mustang could take off from a misty airfield in England, climb to 30,000 feet, fly all the way across Europe, circle over the burning ruins of Berlin for an hour shooting down German fighters, and still have enough fuel to fly all the way back to London. The psychological shock to the German high command was absolute. For years, the Luftwaffe had operated on the absolute certainty that the skies deep over Germany were their exclusive sanctuary. When the Mustangs first appeared over Berlin in March 1944, it shattered the entire German defensive strategy. According to the post-war historical interrogations of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, the commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, the realization of what the Mustang meant was the moment he knew the war was lost. Göring is famously recorded as stating that when he looked up into the sky and saw American fighter planes flying over Berlin, he knew the jig was up. The German fighter pilots were suddenly facing a machine that could dive faster than they could, turn tighter at high speeds, and never ever had to break off the fight because of low fuel. But the final nail in the coffin of the Luftwaffe was not just the machine itself. It was a ruthless, completely uncompromising change in military tactics. In early 1944, General Jimmy Doolittle took command of the 8th Air Force. Doolittle looked at the situation and issued a legendary order that permanently changed aerial combat. Before Doolittle, American fighter escorts were ordered to stay locked to the bombers. They were not allowed to chase German fighters. They had to stay in a defensive formation. Doolittle ripped up that rulebook. He ordered the Mustang pilots to take the fight to the enemy. His new directive was simple and terrifying. Do not just protect the bombers, clear the skies. When the Mustang pilots were unleashed, they transformed from bodyguards into apex hunters. When the German Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts dove on the bomber formations, the P-51s would drop their fuel tanks, throttle up their massive Merlin engines, and ruthlessly chase the Germans down. Because the Mustang had so much excess fuel and speed, they would dogfight the Germans until the Luftwaffe pilots literally ran out of gas and tried to land. And the Mustangs would follow them right down to the ground. The American pilots began strafing the German airfields, destroying hundreds of Luftwaffe fighters before they could even take off, blowing up fuel dumps, and shooting up the trains trying to supply the air bases. The Luftwaffe was being strangled in its own backyard. The German veteran pilots, the aces who had survived years of combat, were being hunted to extinction, replaced by terrified, poorly trained teenagers who were being thrown into the cockpits of German fighters just to be instantly swatted out of the sky by thousands of roaming, bloodthirsty Mustangs. By the time the Allies launched the D-Day invasion in June of 1944, the once invincible German Luftwaffe had been practically erased from the sky. The skies over Normandy belonged entirely to the Allies, and that total air supremacy was built on the sleek, silver wings of the P-51. The Mustang was not just a plane, it was a perfectly timed miracle of engineering. It was the absolute fusion of American manufacturing and British engine design, creating a weapon that permanently altered the geography of the war. It turned the skies of Europe from a slaughterhouse for American bombers into a graveyard for the Third Reich. This is the raw, uncompromising history that the sanitized textbooks often fail to capture. This is the reality of what it takes to break the back of an empire. If this deep dive into the engineering, the tactics, and the sheer dominance of the P-51 Mustang gave you a perspective you've never considered before, hit that like button right now. We do not sugarcoat history on this channel. We expose the raw realities that demand to be heard. Subscribe to the channel and make sure your notifications are turned on, because we are going to keep tearing down the myths, exposing the lies, and bringing you the most powerful, unfiltered historical realities. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the P-51 Mustang was the greatest fighter plane ever built, or does another World War II aircraft deserve the crown? I read every single comment, and I will see you in the next one.